Hello, everybody. Glad you could join us again. Today, we have an exciting guest straight out of the world of diving, climbing, and overall athletics. We are here with Meili Carpenter. Meili, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. And we're also here with X. X, what's up?
How are you doing, Van?
Excited to be here. Great day, great time to have a good conversation. But I want to just jump right in. Meili, if you could tell us in 2 minutes tops, give us kind of like a short rundown of how you got into diving, how you got into climbing, and just the overall journey.
I started diving when I was in high school. I was actually trying to get credit for a gym class. So the way kind of my high school worked was if you did school athletics, you could get credit for gym class instead of actually taking the class at school. So I was trying to do that, and I discovered I was kind of all right with at it, and kept on going. I was in gymnastics at the time, and injuries kind of forced me to quit gymnastics. So I switched over full time to diving. I competed at NCAA Division One on a full scholarship, and then I actually retired for a little bit. Well, I competed at Olympic trials in 2012, and then I retired for a couple of years. And then an old friend actually pulled me into performing, into doing dive shows for the summer. I was teaching at the time, so I had summers free, and he asked if I wanted a job for the summer, and so I did that. And I discovered that performing was really fun. Doing dive shows was really fun, and I could teach when I was older. And an athletic and a performing career is rather limited in terms of time. So I ended up quitting my teaching job and started performing full time. And so I've been doing that since 2014. Um, and then because of COVID, I lost my full time performing job, which was a dive show abroad in Macau, which is near Hong Kong. And so after that, I started competing professionally for cliff diving, which is it's the Red Bull Cliff Diving World Series circuit. And so yeah, that's where I'm at right now. And I am getting ready for a season that's starting up in June.
Very nice, my alley. My question to you is: so you started diving for credit for gym credit. How
Mhm.
invested were you in it early on, and when did you start? Did you start ninth grade, 10th grade?
I started ninth grade. I guess the first year I was like, I was invested enough that I didn't want to be the worst one, but I wasn't super serious about it. It was kind of fun. I was with friends. One of my gymnastics friends was doing it with me. So I was kind of like half invested. And I remember that my coach at the time was very, very invested in me. Like, he was very insistent that I take it seriously and very insistent that I do all of these things. And I was kind of just having a good time, and I didn't really understand. And looking back, as a more mature adult, I understand exactly what he was doing. Um, and so yeah, I didn't really start taking it seriously until maybe like when I realized that my gymnastics career was coming to a close, and that diving was going to kind of be my full-time sport. So maybe like 6 or 8 months down the road.
Now, can you talk a little bit about your passion for gymnastics and what made it? I don't know. You said injuries, but can you do it now? Was it just a temporary injury, or was it like something that was like, no way?
I started gymnastics when I was 4, and I loved it from day one. I absolutely love gymnastics. It was very hard to quit. Going through puberty, and just kind of gymnastics takes a beating out of you. So, and I was competing at a high enough level that it was tough to get through workouts at the time. And I wasn't exceptional at gymnastics. I was much, much better at diving. So, I kind of came to a point where I realized that I wasn't really going any further with the sport, and it was time to move on and to switch. And like, if I hadn't had diving to kind of focus on at the time, I definitely would have been really lost. But I would say those injuries have generally healed. They were just kind of like overuse injuries, just a lot of beating. And I mean, at this moment, I'm actually performing in a show that does include a lot of gymnastics. It includes some tumbling. It includes like a lot of the things that I would have done from gymnastics and the skills that I used from that sport.
Very nice. So it came back full circle. So that's
It
great to
did.
hear. Great to hear. So you start taking diving seriously. Just for novices who are listening to the podcast, casual listeners, what are some criteria to be a great diver, and like what are you judged off of?
So for diving, well, I'll start with the judging first. Judging is you're judged on the overall impression of the dive, and it starts from, you know, the moment that you set up on the springboard or the platform or whatever you're competing on, all the way through the entry. And everybody knows that a good entry is going to get higher scores, but you're also judged on how you look in the air and how your takeoff is. And there are some physics and some mechanics that go into this judging scheme. So you're judged out of 10 points, with 10 being the highest and 0 being an incorrect or incomplete dive. And I guess to be a great diver, I would say the first and foremost, coming from a coaching perspective, first and foremost is that somebody loves it and wants to get better, because you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't enjoy it and if you don't want to be the best, then you're just never going to get there. But some other things, like you need to improve your aerial awareness. So just knowing where you are in space as you're flipping around. Flexibility is good. Some basic strength is good. So if you're a springboard diver, you need different strength than if you're a platform diver, slightly, just because of how the sport works. So just strength, flexibility, mental fortitude, because diving is very mental, especially when you get up into the higher heights, because I currently do cliff diving, and that's very mentally strenuous.
I really you said something very interesting there about the mental game of it, and I want to dig into that for a second. Could you walk us through kind of like your mental process, like when you're getting ready for a dive, when you're about to make the jump, and then afterwards? What does that process look like for you?
Okay, well, I will go through kind of my cliff diving part. This will be a little different for like a springboard and a platform diver, and maybe for the novices who will start down there. But as it becomes a lot more obvious in cliff diving, I'll go through that. Basically, like for me, it's really important that I am fully confident that what I'm about to do is going to be successful, because at the heights that I'm working, an unsuccessful dive is potentially, it's going to be very problematic. It could result in a concussion. It can result in some serious injury. So my big thing is that I'm fully confident that I'm going to be successful when I walk to the edge of the platform. One thing that I really like to focus on is, just because I've done all this preparation to make sure that this is successful, is I go into what I call autopilot, which is basically I don't think very much. So I have a couple of cues that I'll tell myself, like they're just very easy, simple words to remind me what I need to focus on. And then I count myself down before the dive. So if you watch videos of me competing, you can actually see me talking, and I'm talking to myself out loud as I get ready for the dive. And then one thing that I know I use this for kids when I'm coaching, is I will tell them to count themselves down. But then the ultimate thing is that you have to go when you say go. So that's my big thing.
Like no hesitation. You just got to just go.
Yep. You can't count yourself down and then not go. That just doesn't work. So you say 3, 2, 1, go, and then you have to go no matter what.
That's very interesting, because I mean, as you mentioned, the margin of error is like razor thin. So you kind of have to like fully commit at all times throughout the entire process.
Yes.
So how did you kind of come up with that? Like, was it just an experience taught type of thing where you kind of said, okay, well, I noticed when I do these things, I perform better? Or how did you get into that process?
A lot of it's kind of learning about yourself. I realize that I overthink things a lot, so that I perform the best when I don't think, when I've done all the preparation and I just kind of let my body do the work. I also, with the experience that I have, that I need to have a lot of trust in my body that it knows what it's doing. And that goes along with maybe a younger athlete just having the trust in their coach, because their coach hopefully will not tell them to do something that they are not prepared for. So just having the trust that their body knows what is going on, their coach knows that they are ready for whatever they're about to do. So it's a learning process, and everybody is different. I find the countdown works for a majority of people, but it doesn't work for everybody.
So what was I'm gonna throw it back to high school. What was the recruiting process like for you, and then how did you pick your school, and what school did you end up picking overall?
For university,
Yes.
so the recruiting process is basically, at the time, so this will date me a bit, although it's still similar now, but you basically take videos of you practicing and competing and you send it to college coaches. You kind of figure out what types of schools you're looking for. So I knew I wanted to compete Division One, NCAA Division One. So I sent my videos to a whole bunch of college coaches. The timeline keeps changing, but for me, it was the end of junior year before senior year. I believe that the timeline is slightly different now, but I'm not sure what it is at the moment. And then if they're interested, they contact you back. They might bring you out for what's called an official visit, where they bring you on, they house you usually with somebody on the team already. And so you spend a couple of days on campus. You see what it's like to be a part of the team. You see the facilities, you interact with the coach, and then if you decide that you like the school, then you either verbally or you sign a letter of intent for the school, and then you're at the school for hopefully the next 4 years unless you transfer.
And what school did you pick?
I picked the University at Buffalo in New York.
Nice, nice, nice. And for those of you listening, you can start contacting coaches at the beginning of your junior year. At the beginning of your junior year. Um, my next question has to deal with the Red Bull diving series. I think it's a great entry point for diving. Obviously, it's pretty extreme and it's pretty intense, but also as a viewer, it's like such a beautiful sport. Like you guys are always in the most interesting areas. Does that ever come into factor? Does it ever come into play that yeah, I'm diving, like I love diving, but like I'm diving like in this beautiful location?
I mean, one of the things that I try to make sure I do, because the series is stressful and it's very exhausting by the end of the summer, but one thing I try to really focus on is every every time I'm getting ready to compete. So I'm standing up on the platform and getting ready to go through the whole process of doing my dive for the judges. Is I really like to look out around and just like appreciate where we're at and just all of the things that brought me there, and just the absolute gorgeous view that only a few people in the world get to see. So I really try to make sure that I take some time every single dive to appreciate that, because man, there have been some incredible places, and I know this year we're going to some really cool places as well.
It kind of helps, and I like what you said about taking the time to appreciate what brought you there. I found like it really helps to be in the present when you're in sort of these competitive endeavors, especially athletics. I can't imagine something like diving, but especially athletics is when you find that time to be present, and to your point, just appreciate all the work and all the people that kind of brought you to that place. It definitely aids in having better performance, right?
Yes, absolutely. And even if, like, things happen and you're not on the top of your game every single day, but just appreciating what, like, the incredible things that happen even on not your not awesome days. It just makes everything wonderful.
Oh yeah, for sure. And to your point, you just brought up too, as far as not being on your game. Like I'm curious for you, what does that process look like, right? Like let's say you compete and you might not place what you were hoping or expecting to. What's that process from there as far as reconciling, understanding what you might need to get better at and then moving forward from that?
One thing, so I'm going to go back to my early years of diving, but for a moment. And one thing that one of my coaches said to me that I've kind of always internalized and I have always tried to teach is you're going to have bad days and maybe you're very upset. And a lot of times you might see other athletes crying, or you might see other athletes like angry or upset or whatever. So, and it's sometimes a good thing because it means you care. But one thing my very first coach told me was like, you have until midnight. You can be upset until midnight, and then tomorrow is a new day and we're moving on, because there's nothing you can do about it. We can just move on and get better. So that's something I also try to like focus on when I, don't have a great day. And this goes with practice as well. If I don't have a great day and I'm upset and I'm frustrated, I try to basically like give myself the moment to be frustrated and to give myself the moment to be upset and bummed that I maybe didn't do as well as I wanted to. But then, when the next day comes, like, we're moving on, we're doing something new, we're trying to get better.
Well, I guess I'm curious to hear about, if you could talk about a time that you would call like your greatest failure, and then a time that you would call like your greatest triumph. Like, what would those two situations be?
Ooh, I mean, I guess, that's a tough one. I'm gonna go with the
Didn't mean to
triumph
put you on the spot.
first. It's okay. I'm gonna go with the triumph first, just because it's a little bit easier. I had a kind of an aha moment at the beginning of last season, because like I've always done cliff diving, like, because I enjoyed it and I knew I was kind of good at it. And then I kind of had an aha moment at the beginning of last season, because the very first competition we did, it was my fourth competition ever, and I placed third, and I had zero idea that I had placed third, and everybody was really excited for me, and I was like, what happened? And I had placed, third, which is a podium finish, for the first time, and it was just kind of like a moment where I was like, oh, actually, I'm kind of okay at this. So that was just it was an amazing feeling, and just the fact that I enjoyed the event from start to finish and was happy with how I performed. It was just it's a feeling that it's very hard to describe, and I don't know that I'm ever going to have again. And I am holding on to that for as long as I can. Um, so I would say my greatest failure, I don't know. I would say a failure might be like, for me personally, I kind of deal with some confidence issues sometimes, and just like feeling like I let people down, or feeling like I embarrassed myself by doing something, which intelligently I know is kind of crazy. But emotionally, sometimes I'm like, oh, that was so embarrassing. I didn't do as well as I wanted to, and that was embarrassing, or I let somebody down. And it's not something that I should be thinking, but it is something that I deal with as I go through this competition process.
I appreciate the background there, and I apologize for putting you on the spot.
Oh, it's all good.
But I like what you said about the triumph was just a feeling that you couldn't necessarily put into words. And I've spoken with a ton of athletes, and they all speak about just that moment of like being in the zone type. Like, you kind of just know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think experiencing that and trying to replicate it is so important just over the journey of, whatever that ends up being for you, in this case, diving and gymnastics, right? Like, I think having those specific moments can propel you and fuel you much further ahead than if you didn't have that experience.
I would agree.
X, are you back with us, or?
Yeah, I had to switch to the phone. So my next question to you is, what was life like, at Buffalo, all the way through to trials in 2012?
At Buffalo, I mean, I went through kind of a normal college process. You go to classes. The only thing different was I had about 18 hours of practice per week, practicing for diving, and then we go to competitions on the weekend. Our competition season was like November until March, approximately. And after I graduated college and finished my eligibility in 2010. And so I elected to stay at Buffalo as a volunteer assistant coach for 2 years so I could train for Olympic trials. And then when I competed Olympic trials in June. After that, I took a nice long break. I was planning to retire, and that clearly worked out great.
Nice. So any experiences throughout that time that you can just recall now that have been beneficial to you, either in coaching or even to diving nowadays?
I think the frequency of competition, I learned how to compete really well there. Cliff diving is a bit different, so it took a bit more time to figure out how to compete cliff diving, and I'm still working on it. But just kind of the value of learning how to compete and the value of learning what you need mentally. I learned that maybe my brain can't handle so many specific, like very minor changes to my technique in one day, and I need to take a break. I learned that I process overnight. So I learned a lot about myself during that time, stuff that I still use today. I don't honestly have like a moment during my time at Buffalo, but it was just kind of the whole process.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, I guess I'd be curious to dig in more just process wise. Like, how would you say that you manage just the ups and downs in like a general sense of competing and training and discovering yourself? Like, how do you manage some of those highs and lows?
Oh, yeah, that's tough. It's I know that I'm very aware of being burnt out because I know that if I get to a point where I'm burnt out, it takes me a long time to pull out of that. So I make sure that I don't get burnt out as much as possible, which is tough when you're in the middle of a competition season. But um, one of the big things that I really try to remind myself and anybody I'm coaching is that first and foremost, it should be fun. And if it's not fun, then we're doing it wrong. So a lot of times burnout can come from lack of fun. Like you got too caught up in the competition or the results or something, and you burnt out just because you forgot to enjoy it. And I definitely resonate with that a lot. When I got burnt out last year, it was because I realized that I was too focused on external results that I don't have control of. And when I really enjoyed it, it was because I was enjoying the process through myself. So that's something that I try to remember when I go into trainings or something and I'm feeling less motivated. I try to just play around and do something that I maybe wouldn't normally do, or like challenge myself in a different type of way. And that kind of keeps things, gives me some variety because I need variety. Not everybody's like
Same.
this, but I get bored easily. So I need a lot of
Same.
variety in my life. So
Yep.
yeah,
Same
that's what
here.
I try to do. That comes from like, knowing what you need and knowing yourself as an athlete too.
I think you bring up a number of good points. As far as like knowing yourself, right? Like, how did you kind of come to some of these discoveries about just your personality and the way you think about things? Like, was it just a matter of journaling, or was it just a matter of like a lot of self-reflection? But what were some of those tangible things you did to learn more about yourself and how you tick?
A lot of it is kind of self-reflection. A lot of it I learned while I was in college. And that goes back to that, like, this is what I was able to gain from that college experience. I learned a lot about myself then, where like I don't necessarily need a lot of time in the pool. I need like a focused amount of time, and I can't focus for too long. So that was something that my coach and I discovered when we were working together in Buffalo. And a lot of other stuff came from like performing and just going through the growing pains of being a first time performer and trying to figure out how to do it better, because you know you want to put on your best performance for the audience who's watching. And then in my opinion, competition is the same thing as performing in a show or some sort of live entertainment, because there's just there's scores involved. So there's a lot of self reflection that went on while I was learning to perform, and there's a lot of like stress that happens, but it's like very minor stress. Um, and yeah, so just kind of like figuring out what worked, how I felt. I think the repetition day by day. So when I did shows every single day, like you learn how to get into a zone, even if you don't feel your best, and you learn when I feel this way, this might happen, good or bad. So I think just the repetition through all these different moods and states of being kind of helped me figure out how to adapt to things.
Basically just like getting those reps in continually, right? Like it's almost inevitable that you're going to learn more about yourself and that sort of thing, right?
Essentially, yeah, it's like reps over a long period of time.
Now, I think I saw on your page that you did some stuff with Circus Soleil. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's not that specific company, but it is the same person who did Cirque. Yes.
Got it. So walk us through that experience. How did you get involved? What did you take away from it? What were some of the fun parts of it, and what were some of the more mundane parts of it?
And I got a question to add on to that is, what was a day like, performing? I'm curious as to what would a day look like for you performing?
Okay, so I got into the company is called Dragon. So Franco Dragon created the early Cirque shows, so like Mystère, Allegria, all of the really classic Cirque shows from a long time ago, and then he branched off and made his own company. So his company had a bunch of water shows around the world. So like Cirque is based in Canada, and they do a lot of North American stuff, but Franco Dragon's company did some stuff in China. He's got a show in Dubai now. So he kind of just branched out to the rest of the world, and he did mostly water shows. So I worked for his company. I started in like a smaller show, and I learned to high dive. And so I sent a demo reel in, and basically a strength and an acrobatic demo reel in to their casting department. And they said, hey, we'd like you to come out for, we called it CCO, which is cast changeover. It's basically a 12-week integration period. And after 8 weeks, they're like, yes, we'd like you to stay, or we're gonna not offer you a contract at this time. So it was a very intensive 12-week training period. I was asked to stay for 2 years afterwards, and then after that, I was able to renew my contract as much as I wanted. And so yeah, that's how I got into that. I worked just outside of Hong Kong, which was an amazing experience, and I loved living abroad. I actually just came back in 2021 after COVID. So yeah, that's how I got in over there. And I guess you wanted to know what a day looked like there?
Yeah, like a day in the life, pretty much. Like you wake up, from when you wake up to when you go to bed, like what was kind of everything in between?
Okay. So shows there are fairly late. They're not actually as late as Vegas, but shows there are pretty late. So I would probably wake up around 9:30, 10 in the morning. Macau being a very late rising city, just because it has a very vibrant nightlife. Just nothing's kind of open. So I wake up, I love a very slow morning. So I like to have my coffee in the morning, do a little bit of work, maybe read the news, just a very slow, easy morning. And then I would generally get ready and go to the theater. Depending on the day, I would have different trainings at the theater. So some days I would have high dive training, some days I would have Russian swing training, some days I would have like choreography training or something. So it depending on what the schedule looked like, I'd have to be in at the theater at different times. Generally around 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, sometimes a little bit later, but somewhere in that ballpark. So we do our trainings, and then at probably about 3:30, I would do my makeup for the show. And at 4:30, particularly on the first day of our work week, which is a Thursday, we would have an all artistic meeting, which is pretty much everybody in the theater part of the show. So not technicians, but the cast and the musicians, and then all of our coaches. We would all have a meeting at the beginning of the week to kind of go over specific things in the show that we needed to go over. And then our first show was at 5 o'clock. It was a 90-minute show. So at 6:30, we were done with the show. There was a break. We weren't allowed to leave the theater when we were in show makeup. So there was a break. You have, it was about an hour and a half as artists. We didn't have anything required to do at that time. That hour and a half was for technical to change over and to preset for the next show, which started at 8. So our next show was at 8. But between those two shows, like you can have dinner. Some people would train. I honestly spent a lot of time talking to the coaches or talking to stage management. I picked up a lot of skills during that hour and a half break just because I was interested in other departments. So I didn't actually train during that in between time. I trained before the show. And so our second show was at 8 o'clock, another 90-minute show. By the time I got back to my dressing room and took off my makeup and showered and did all of what I needed to do, I generally got home around 10:30. And then at that point, I'd need to eat dinner or have a snack or something. And then I am an early riser, so I went to bed probably around 1 in the evening or 1 in the morning, I suppose.
Nice. So 2 90-minute shows, all the
Yes.
preparation that goes with that, closing, and then you started. So the show started on Thursday, and when did they end?
Our work week was Thursday until Monday. So our Friday work of the week, if you will, was a Monday. We had Tuesday, Wednesday dark, which means that we were off and we were not obligated to be at the theater.
Okay. So question: did the show ever change? And then when it did change, or if it did change, would like Monday through like Wednesday be that like training period?
No. So we were generally Thursday through Monday. If there was like a holiday, so like obviously we're near China, so Chinese New Year would kind of mess up that week schedule a little bit. But we basically had a 5-day work week that was written in our contracts for the most part. And so yeah, our schedule didn't change very much. It might get shifted a day here and there just to accommodate for the holidays. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. And then the other part of the question is like, so did the show ever change? Like, was there any act in the show, or did you guys try something new? Like, how did you guys add that into the show, if you did?
Nothing major was changed. The only thing that we generally changed, like we didn't, Cirque kind of incorporates new acts in some of their shows, but we had the same acts. We would have, slight choreography changes, or like if we were running a couple people short on cast members or something like that, like if somebody was sick or something, we might change the choreo a little bit. But all the acts were the same every single day. And then I was cleared for, I think it was 9 different acts, but I would only do maybe 4 or 5 in a day. So my day kept changing all the time, which was awesome. And I loved that about this show, is that I never did the same thing every day.
That's sweet. That's sweet.
Especially since you mentioned, right, like you get bored easily. So
Yep.
having that is a kind of perfect setup.
Oh, it was great. I loved it.
Well, I guess one thing that I'm super curious on, and I know we're coming up on time here, what would you say the importance of having a great support system around you has been just over the length of your career and in your journey? Like having good coaches around you that understand you and genuinely care about you, having family and friends that genuinely care. Can you talk about the importance of having that support system in place?
Oh man, I don't think I'm going to do that justice, because I would not be where I am today without that support system. I still talk to my first coaches. I've always gone to them when I needed advice, or I was having a low. Like they send me messages still. Like I don't see them that often anymore, but like I try to make a point when I'm in town to see them. My parents are my biggest fans, and it's just the best thing ever. I mean, as a teenager, obviously parents are kind of, sometimes you don't have the best relationship with your parents, but man, looking back on it, if I didn't have them supporting me, I definitely would not have made it to where I am today. And even now, just like the coaches that I had through the shows, that everybody taught me something different. And I have always said that like there's no bad coach. Like everybody has something to teach you, even if it's maybe I don't need to be coached this way. So having all that support just has helped me grow so much, and I'm definitely not doing them any justice, but I'm so thankful for that support system that I have between family, friends, and coaches. It's just been a great ride.
Man,
Lastly, on my end, what advice would you give to someone who like I got into diving. I did it to get a a gym credit, but now I'm gonna start taking it serious. What advice would you give to someone like that?
I would say my first advice is to never lose the fun. Always enjoy it. There will be days that you don't, but ultimately the biggest thing is that you have a passion for it and that you enjoy it. And then the second thing would be to work hard, because working hard will always surpass talent.
Each and every time. Like I know you said earlier, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have the work ethic to hone it and really develop it, then it means nothing.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we're kind of at the end here, but what's next for you? Like, what's on your radar? Any big competitions coming up? Like, but what's next?
I have a competition coming up in about a month, actually. So I will head down to Fort Lauderdale in about a month. There is a big competition there, and then directly after that, I will head to Boston to start this Red Bull tour.
That's super exciting. And I gotta ask, I just have to ask, Olympics, have you thought about it? Like, have you considered in the past? Like, what's that kind of thought process for you?
So high diving is actually not an Olympic sport. So there is zero chance right now of of me going to the Olympics as high diving. And I am not at the top of my springboard game anymore. So that Olympic dream is gone, and I'm okay with it. I'm enjoying just doing what I'm doing. I enjoy performing, and I don't need the Olympics. I don't need the Olympics, I guess. If high diving goes to the Olympics, then I would try for that. But the experiences that I've been having lately, I'm very happy with that. Maybe even more so than the Olympics.
I appreciate that perspective because especially just in any competitive arena, it's so easy for us to hold up something on a pedestal, right? And be like, oh, if I could just get to the big stage, or oh, if I could just do this, then I'll finally be happy. And it's just the most unhealthy perspective ever, right?
Yeah, I love being on a stage with a costume. That is probably my ultimate arena.
No, that's dope.
Favorite diving location? That was the question I had earlier.
Ooh. Well, that one's tough because I haven't been to that many. And some of the competitions, like maybe I loved the location, but I didn't perform so well, or the location was okay, but I performed really well. So that one's kind of tough. I've loved every one of them for different reasons.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But I've only been to about seven locations at this point.
Well, hey, we wish you tremendous success in the future, and thank you very much for taking your time today. Everybody's been what's out, everybody. Peace out.